Hi, it's Nadia here, and today I'm going to show you how to make a beaded bar, or what I call a connector, which you can use to make a necklace or some earrings or stacking rings like the ones that I'm wearing. But before I start, please remember to subscribe to our channel, and please have a look at our website. Our bead shop has ready-made kits and a lot of ideas for you to follow. I've put all the details in the box below. So let's get started. I'm going to show you the tools that I'm going to be using today. They are chain nose pliers, flash cutters, and I suggest you use flash cutters for any work that you're doing with wire. However, you can use just normal cutters if you don't have flash cutters. Flat nose pliers and some round nose pliers. You will also need a selection of wire, and for the purpose of this project I suggest no thicker than 0.8, an assortment of beads, and then there's a few other little bits and pieces that we need along the way, but I will talk you through them as we make. So let's start off with a beaded connector. So the first thing I'm going to make is a beaded bar or connector that I'm going to use in a necklace. And I've got a selection of beads here. I've got some pink amethyst and some white faceted beads. And the size of the wire that you need to use is going to depend on the size of the beads, but also on the size of your chain. And as my chain is quite fine, I'm using a 0.4 gauge wire. So I'm going to start off by cutting a piece of wire. I'm going to just roughly cut it, but you'll need about 15 centimeters. So I'm just going to give it a little snip. And I'm going to start off by making my first loop. So I'm going to grab my wire with my round nose pliers, and I'm going to form my loop around the bottom part of my pliers. So in essence, I'm using them as a little mandrel. And when I take it out, I will have a 360 loop. Now make sure that you don't make this loop too tight, because at this point you're already going to feed the chain through it. And to make things easier, I'm going to use a necklace which I've assembled. So it's got the lobster clasp at the end, and I'm just going to cut it in half in the middle using my cutters. So just go in there and give it a snip. And now I'm just going to feed the last link and then I'm going to take it through the loop so it just hangs down. And now I'm going to grab hold of my loop, re-grasp it with my flat nose pliers, just giving it a little squeeze. So now it's nice and tight, and I'm going to hold the top part of my wire and twist it around 3 times. And now, using my cutters, I'm just going to cut it as close as I can to my coil and just give the little protruding edge a little squeeze. So I'm squeezing it back in so there are no sharp edges. And now I'm going to feed my beads onto it. So any beads that you want and any pattern that you want, just feed them on. I'm just going to do alternate agate and white. I'll do one more. So that's a nice size bar. And now I need to finish the other side. So I'm just going to take my round nose pliers and grasp it at the top, just above my bead, and give it a little bend. Now I take off my pliers and I place them just above the little bend. And I'm going to carry the wire over and underneath. So I'm making a 360 loop again on the other side, like so. And I've made sure that I've left it loose so that I can feed the other side of my chain through it. So again, just put the last link of your necklace of the chain onto the wire and feed it through, and then let it go all the way down into the loop, like so. And now I'm going to grab it, the loop, re-grasp it with my flat nose pliers and just give it a little squeeze so it's nice and tight. And I'm going to make a little coil again. I'm going to coil it around 3 times so it's the same as the other side. So just in between my loop and my beads, just carefully carry it through 3 times. And then with your flush nose cutters, just get as close as you can to the coil without damaging it, and cut the excess and give it a little squeeze with your pliers. And your beaded bar necklace is ready. And you can make a couple of these, 2 or 3 different lengths, and layer them. Next, I'm going to show you how to use your beaded bar or connector to make a pair of earrings. And these earrings I'm going to make using some semi-precious beads. And because it's nice for earrings to be lightweight, I'm using very small beads. So I'm using a finer gauge wire, which is 0.3. And I'm going to start it off in exactly the same way. So I'm going to cut off a length of wire with my cutters, and with my pliers I'm going to make a loop, and try and hold your pliers, the wire, as close as you can to the top of your pliers, so the loop on this is small and delicate, because your round nose pliers, as they're tapered, the loops get bigger as you go down the plier. So try and hold it close to the top, and then you'll have a nice little loop. And you just take it over the pliers and then turn the pliers around just a little bit, and then carry on underneath the plier. So when you take them out, you've got your 360 loop. Again, don't have it tight because you want to feed your chain through it at this stage. I've prepared 2 little lengths of chain, about 2 centimeters each, from a delicate chain, a little offcut that I had, and I'm just going to feed the last link onto my wire. And I'm going to make sure that it goes all the way through into the loop and hangs down. And now I'm going to re-grasp my loop with my flat nose pliers. Just give it a little squeeze so it's nice and tight, and straighten your wires if you need. And I'm only going to do 2 little loops on this because it's very delicate, so my coil is just going to have 2 loops. Twist it around twice, and now with my flash cutters I'm going to snip as close as I can to the coil, and I'm just going to place my round nose pliers back into my little loop because it's slightly off center, so just put them back in, and I'm just going to give it a little tug to center it. And now I'm going to feed my little semi-precious beads onto it. I'll use some lapis beads to go on it. So semi-precious beads very often, especially the little ones, tend to have very, very small holes. And some of them, the holes are not straight, so if you're really struggling, some of the beads might not fit. So make sure you've got a few extra than you need, just in case there's any sort of difference in the gauge of the hole. If you take them off, if they're strung and you take them off carefully, you should be able to string a few at a time. And it's up to you how long you want your bar to be, or how big you want your earrings to come out. So I'll just put a couple more on, just because I love lapis. So I'd like my bar to be slightly bigger. Ooh. And now that I've reached the length that I want my bar to be, I'm going to finish the other side by putting my round nose pliers right at the top of my beads. And again, I'm trying to feed the wire as close as I can to the top end so that I have the same size loop as underneath, and so it's delicate. And I'm just going to wrap it over my pliers and carry it through underneath. So again, I have a 360 loop, which is not tight because now I'm going to feed the other part of the chain that I cut earlier on in exactly the same way as I did before. So the last link is going to go on my wire and then carefully down through the loop so it's hanging at the bottom. And now you can re-grasp your loop with the flat nose pliers, and I'm just going to straighten my wire so it's nice and straight going up, and I'm going to make my coil, and so it matches the other side. I'm going to coil it around twice. So I'm coiling it in between my loop and my beads 2 times. And I'm going to trim off the excess with my flash cutters. And then I'm just going to give the little edge a squeeze so I have nothing sticking out, but make sure that you don't damage your coil when you do this. Okay, so my bar is ready now, and I'm going to just curve it a bit because I think it's prettier on an earring when it's slightly curved. And because this wire is so soft, you can just give it a little shape with your fingers. Now I'm going to attach my finished bar onto my earring hook. And I do this by taking a small jump ring which I'm going to open. Remember to always open your jump rings forwards or backwards, never to the side, so that they don't get misshapen. And I'm going to put one end of the chain onto the jump ring. And then I'm going to put the second side, again through the last link. Onto my jump ring. And now I'm going to put the loop at the bottom of my earring hook onto it, and then I'm just going to carefully close it, making sure there are no gaps. And my little bar earring is ready. And you can make this any size and any length that you want, and in any materials that you like. The last thing I'm going to show you using a beaded bar is how to make a ring, and I've made some little stacking rings. I'm going to show you how to make these rings to fit your finger without having to use a mandrel. So I've got, instead of a mandrel, a little mascara tube, but anything that's round, that's kind of a similar size to your finger, could be a lipstick, is good to use for this. And the first thing I'm going to do is cut my wire, and I suggest you go no thicker than 0.8 on these rings, otherwise it's very difficult to make the little coils and make them sit properly. But again, it depends on the size of your beads. So I would say 0.6 or 0.8 is the gauge that you need. And the first thing that I'm going to do is make the little beaded bar that goes at the top. So I'm going to cut a length of my wire. You could use about 10 centimeters. And I'm going to place my round nose pliers sort of about a third of the way down, and I'm going to twist the wire around it. Then I slightly reposition my pliers, and I'm just going to carry the wire through underneath. So I've got a full circle, which I am now going to take hold of with my flat nose pliers. And I'm just going to make a little coil. I'm just going to twist it around twice because this wire is quite thick and I don't want it to be very chunky. So I've got a little coil. I'm just going to slightly centralize my loop by putting my round nose pliers into it. And I'm going to trim off the excess wire with my flash cutters as close as I can. And just give the little end a little squeeze so it doesn't protrude. And now I'm going to put my beads on it. And the number of beads that I use is really to cover the top part of my finger. So don't worry about the shape at the moment. It's really just to get the size right. So I'm going to make the ring for this finger, and I think I can use one more bead. That looks about right. And I'm going to finish this little bar on the other side in the same way. So I'm going to put my little brown nose pliers at the top, and I'm just going to make a little bend in my wire, and then I take the pliers out and place them again just above that little bend, and I twist it around, and then I carry it through underneath. So once more I have a 360 loop, which I'm going to now take hold of with my flat nose pliers, and again I will just make a little coil by making 2 twists, so it's not too thick or too bulky. I'm just going to put my pliers into this little loop and give it a little twist just to centralize it. And now I will cut off the excess as close as I can with my flash cutters, and give the little edge a little squeeze in between the coil and the beads, just so it's not sharp and doesn't cut me afterwards. So now I've got a little bar, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of shape by placing it over my little round, well, I'm using, as I said, a mascara tube, but you can use anything round, anything, any tube. It's really just to give it some shape, because metal does have memory, and if you tease it into shape as you go along, it should keep it quite well. So now I'm going to make my ring shank to go underneath my top bar, and I'm going to cut another length of wire. And I'm just going to slightly sort of tease it so it's curved going upwards, because in the end that's how we'll want it to be. And I'm going to make a loop, but just a single small loop at the top end using my round nose pliers. So I'm just going to slowly tease it around so I've got a loop, and then centralize it, and I'm going to make sure that it's well closed. And now I'm going to open it with my flat nose pliers. So when you're opening a loop, always open it from the front, either front or back, but never to the side. And I'm just going to place my beaded bar on it, and then close it. So again, forwards or backwards, whichever motion is easy for you. And I'm just going to give it a little squeeze to make sure it doesn't open. And now I want to make sure that I make the ring the right size to fit me. So I'm going to trim this a bit because I've got too much wire here and it's difficult to feed it through. And I'm going to put the wire through the second loop and carry it down a bit. And now I'm going to make sure that it's the right size for whichever finger you choose. I'm going to put the ring on my finger to make sure that I'm doing it the right size. I'm going to place it over my finger and then pull the wire, but then make sure that you can get it on and off your finger easily, because obviously it's slightly wider in the middle. So this looks right to me. I'm just going to make just a little bend so that I know where I want it. And don't worry about the shape at the moment. When I take it off, it won't be quite right, but it's really just for working out the size. And now I'm going to trim off the excess. And I'm going to make a loop on the other side, which is the same as I did before. And I'm going to open my loop with my flat nose pliers gently so that I can feed my beaded bar through it. And now I'm going to close the loop and I'm going to give it a little squeeze to make sure there are no gaps so it doesn't open when I'm wearing it. So once I've attached my bar onto the bottom, which is my shank, I just want to shape it again carefully on my little, I'm going to use my mascara tube again. So just gently place it on and with your fingers just form it so it makes a nice curve. And then take it off. And it should fit perfectly. And you can make several of these and stack them using different materials and different stones. And of course, you can make them for every finger because you're making them to measure, which is the beauty of these rings. So now that you know how simple it is to make a beaded bar or a connector and how many projects you can make with it, I hope you'll enjoy making it. Please leave us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want any of our kits, we have ready-made kits for all of these styles and they are available to buy from our website, as are the tools and the wire. Enjoy!